Welcome back to video 3 of the Learn to Quilt series. We'll be focusing on the orange block. This is a 4-patch chain block. Really fun. Same thing we've done before. Sizing your fabrics, cutting accurate strips. Download this so you have the exact number of strips and the measurements on the Shabby Fabrics homepage, free downloads. Subscribe if you haven't done that. I bet you already have. Good job. So let's get going. We have 3 oranges and 1 white fabric to make up this block. It's your standard quilting supplies, nothing extra needed for this particular week. You'll be working with a darker orange. I've cut my strips out ahead of time. So out of the dark orange, we have 1 2.5-inch strip. We have 1 4.5-inch strip. That's going to be subcut. I'm going to go into that with you momentarily. A light orange, that's 1 4.5-inch strip and subcut into 4 4.5-inch squares. And then we have an orange dot fabric in here and 2 white strips. So let's talk about the subcutting. We've done a little bit of that before, but I really want to talk about when you have to do multiple squares. Do you choose to cut them one at a time, or do you cut them as a group? So let's go back to our particular block. We have 1 square in the middle, that's the darker orange. I've cut my strip 4.5. And whenever I cut a strip, I typically, I often start on the right and actually work my way left versus always cutting on the left. Just know that's an option for you. I could do one of 2 things. I want to just show this option while we're here. Let me scoot this over a little bit. You've seen me in the very beginning, in the first video, I kind of lined things up and I started on my left and worked my way to the right. Obviously, I did that at one point. Let's do that again now. I'm just going to square that up. And then my ruler is 4.5 inches. I can just lie that down here, just like this. I don't even need to be on a line on the mat. Watch this. This is the point of this. I don't need to be lined up with the grid on my mat right now. My ruler is 4.5. All I'm doing now is lining this up with my ruler that's 4.5 inches, and I'm making that cut, right? So how cool. I don't have to rely on this mat. People believe rulers are more accurate than mats. I don't know if it's true, but for those that believe that, this is exactly how they would cut that. Your other option could be over on the right side. I'm starting to expand your options now. I could have cleaned up the edge on the right side and simply use the mat, 1, 2, 3, 4.5, use the lines on my mat and cut my 4.5-inch square, right? 6 of one, half dozen another. I just wanted to throw that option out there. If you have a preference, do it your way. Do what works best for you. All right, so we have our 1, actually now we have 2, but I'll put that aside. We needed 1 of that 4.5-inch strip to be subcut to 4.5. Consequently, you have a lot of fabric left over now, don't you, of that dark fabric, that dark orange. Put it aside. That's going to come into play when you get ready to do your bonus project, which is only available when you buy the Learn to Quilt kit from Shabby Fabrics. We are not offering this as a separate item to be purchased as long as this kit is available. You will get a shabby shape this month. You'll be getting the beautiful daisy in the orange. Put it aside. We'll be using that at the end. So just wanted to mention that. Out of the light orange, we need 4 of those. You have a decision to make here. You can either lay out your strip, and you might want to just cut them 1 square at a time. Or you may decide that you want to fold the fabric onto itself and cut them all simultaneously. Pros and cons. Pro, all done at one time, boom, you're sewing. Everything's cut out. Con, you mess up that cut, you mess it up 4 times. Especially in certain kits, we've given you a lot of mess up fabric. We've assumed you're going to make some cutting errors, some sewing errors. We've given you plenty of fabric in your beginner kit. But in more advanced kits that you may buy down the road, we don't have that kind of leeway. You can't be making gross errors. So just know that I want to just alert you that if you do decide to cut in kind of a more efficient manner where you're cutting through multiple layers at a time, there is a risk then that you could potentially be making multiple arrows simultaneously. I'm just going to stack that twice. I think I'm a little more comfortable with that versus trying to lay this on top of itself and have 4 layers evenly stacked. I'm going to make this cut. And I know I'm just going to go this direction. Notice I'm working right to left. So that was the option I talked to you about before. But I'm just going to turn this over real quick. Let's go back to the other option. If you don't want to rely on the lines of this mat and I want to rely on the ruler, then I'm going to line the ruler up on my left side like this, lining up exactly over top of the edge of that fabric and cutting here like that. So now I have my 4. That's sub cutting. Pros and cons of group cutting. We already talked about that. So I've got my squares and I've got my strips. What we need to do in order to make this block is this is called a 4-patch right here. Makes sense, right? So you'll be doing strip sets. We did that in the previous video with the rail fence block. So this is already familiar to you. And we need to cut 4.5-inch sections. Excuse me, 2.5-inch section, 4 2.5-inch sections. The block will be 4.5, excuse me. So let's clean that edge up real quick with our ruler. In this instance, I am going to rely on the accuracy of this ruler and I will be cutting left to right in here. So let's just make sure everything's coming in here nice and smooth. This is where, remember that bonus ruler I talked about? This is where you'd bring that bonus ruler in. That ruler is 2.5 inches by 6.5. It's an even better ruler to use with this because the ruler is 2.5 and that's what we're cutting. I don't have that with me right now, so let's just go with what we have. The cool thing is, again, with this Creative Grid ruler, is that I already have my 2.5-inch mark here. So talk about confirmation. I am absolutely where I need to be because it's telling me that I'm in the right location. Now I'm going to cut and I'm going to just keep cutting all the way down. And of course, if you look at this, I need 1, 2, 3, and 4 of those. And I'll be doing the same with this. And you just keep going. We've done that ahead of time, so let's bring that out. You get the idea. You're just going to keep going, marching down there and kind of cut, cut, cut. You need 4 of those units. So let's bring that out. So now we've got our 2 different sections. Press to the dark side. Let's nest those seams. We've already done that in our previous video when we made the rail fence block. Make sure those lock in beautifully. Put in a pin. One at the beginning, one at the end, and we're going to take that to the sewing machine with a 1/4-inch seam. Now we have to make 4 of these units, right? This is a 4-patch. This unit itself is a 4-patch, and there's 4 of them. So rather than taking this to the machine and just sewing one at a time, clipping my threads, I'm going to get more of them lined up and ready to go so that we can do that as a batch. You've seen me obviously sew the 1/4-inch seam before, being very careful. This is one thing I want to point out to you. As you come into the sewing machine, as it comes to the intersection, the feed dogs, that's the kind of rough part of the sewing machine that pulls the fabric along. Why they call it feed dogs? I don't know. It's a weird name, but its job is to grab the fabric and pull it through. Sometimes it wants to grab that seam and pull it this way. Don't let it do that. For that reason, sometimes people will actually put a second pin to hold that down so that it doesn't flip the opposite direction, and that way those seam allowances lay nice and flat. Let's just do this. Let's just sew this together. You've seen me sew, obviously, but I want you to see the chain stitching. I want you to see how it just keeps going. There's a little bit of a gap between from one unit to the next. Let's just do this together. Hanging on to my threads, of course. And I always somehow manage to leave my magnetic pin cushion across the table from myself. There's that important place again. we want that interlocking seam to lie good and flat. Okay, this is what I'm showing you here. Once I'm done with this, I don't have to stop. I can just feed. There's a little bit of a gap. I lift up my presser foot. Some people don't even lift that up. They just continue sewing and the next unit feeds in. It saves you time, it saves you thread. Now I'm going to make sure here, I just pulled that pin probably a little bit too early. I'm going to look, yep, that little seam allowance is behaving itself. It's lying that way and not curling back toward myself. If that happens, seam rip it. Just seam rip it. Start again. Okay, seam rip. And now I would have the other 2 units and I would chain stitch the whole thing. We did that ahead of time and that's what this looks like here. That's chain stitching. Plus, you don't lose things. It's all in one row. It's really fun. Efficient, saves thread. Good quality thread is not cheap. So, you're saving money by doing that too. Now I simply take my scissors and I cut apart. Just be careful you're cutting only that thread and not cutting any of your fabric. Now, as we said before, how do you press this thing? Well, you could press the seam open, but do you see what it wants to do? It naturally kind of wants to flow in this clockwise direction. Let it be. Let it do what it naturally wants. Now, this is the coolest thing ever. You simply go to the center and it kind of pops open. There we go. There we go. Takes you a little bit sometimes, but look at that. Do you see how everything wants to go? You allow it to go in the direction it naturally wants. And it's like a little tiny 4-patch quilt right in the middle of that. The beautiful thing is it lays so beautifully flat. Look at this. Look how it literally just sits so nice and flat. There's not a weird bump. You're not pressing seams open. Everything is locked in. Now you'll simply continue and do all 4 of those that way, right? You're just going to press that open. That center, you're just going to kind of mess with it till it lays kind of flat open. Then what I always recommend is you go ahead and lay out your quilt block. So let me get my picture of my quilt block. Take a glance at what you're supposed to be doing here. I can't tell you how many times I have sewn together a block wrong because I assumed I had something out of whack. So use your pattern picture. I'm using right now a little image of the quilt block to help me lay out so that I make sure that I'm doing this properly. I'm like, okay, my dark oranges all go toward the middle. My light oranges are on the outside. Okay. As you would suspect, there's my quilt block. As you would suspect, the top row will be sewn together. You'll simply go right sides together, sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance, pressing toward the light orange because I have more seams on the left. This wants to go this way. It just does. Same here. Now this is a unit. Then I'll go here, 1/4 inch seam allowance. And as you would suspect, the seams are going to want to go toward the middle because there's 1 fabric versus 2. So let me show you what that row would look like. That's what that will look like. We will repeat that for the bottom. It's an exact replica. It's an exact replica. It's just turned 180 degrees. So let's get that out of the way. So I've got my top and my bottom. Notice how the seam allowances are going toward the middle. We always want interlocking seams. So how would you suspect the seam allowance should be on the middle row? We know we can't go in the middle too because then you've got too much bulk. So you're going to be pressing toward the lighter orange so that we do have those interlocking seams. And that's exactly what we did here. And we're of course pressing that way. So let's get those out of the way. So now you have your 3 sections. And as you would suspect, top row goes to the bottom. Now I have my beautiful interlocking seams. Notice there's 2 spots. I want you to pin this in this order, so that way we are increasing our chances of being very happy with what we've done. We have 2 very important seams, 2 interlocking seams. I feel that lock. I feel them nest. Interlocking seams, nesting seams, same ballpark. So I wanted to explain that. Same thing. I feel that little lock there. Let's put in that pin. And then one at the beginning, of course, toward the beginning, I should say. And then one at the very end. And if you want to put some pins in between, do it. But this is how I pin sections of a block together and then blocks of a block of a quilt together every time. So you're going to take that to your sewing machine and sew your 1/4 inch, taking your pins out, pressing the seam. At that point, you're that one's probably going to go toward the middle. We've got a lot more seams on this side, press toward the middle, and then you're going to do the same thing with the bottom, pinning and pressing. Your block will measure 12.5 inches. I will be back next week to take you through the yellow block. You're doing great. Hang in there.